Mr. Chairman. I note that this nominee has been criticized regarding some tweets that he put out on the Iran deal, which I consider to be one of the most critical agreements that this country has entered into. And that kind of criticism regarding tweets from folks who didn't say anything about the kind of lying racist tweets out of the former president, I think is pretty rich. I'd like to say that regarding the Iran deal, it placed significant and verifiable constraints on Iran's ability to build nuclear weapons. That was the intent of the Iran deal, because Iran was maybe 1 or 2 months from having developed a nuclear weapon. So that was a very critical agreement that we got into, and former President Trump's reckless decision to unilaterally withdraw from the Iran deal has made the world less safe. Instead of isolating Iran, the decision isolated the United States. And now Iran has begun ramping up uranium enrichment efforts, which is exactly what Dr. Kahl said would happen. And the criticism of Dr. Kahl's alleged tepid support of Israel is unfounded. In 2009, he worked to approve U.S. support for Israel's Iron Dome rocket defense system to protect itself from incoming attacks. So with regard to the Middle East, I think the criticism of Dr. Kahl are very much misplaced. I'm going to ask you, Dr. Kahl, the following 2 questions that I ask of every nominee who appears before any of the committees on which I sit. The first question is, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No.
Dr. Kahl, I applaud Secretary Austin's recent announcement that the Pentagon will prioritize climate change considerations in its activities, risk assessments, and the next national defense strategy, and also the recognition in your opening statement that climate change represents an existential challenge. I have to say that the Department of Defense is one of the few departments that has actually, through testimony of prior DoD secretaries and going forward, to acknowledge that climate change poses a threat to the world, not just to our country. So it is an existential challenge. If confirmed, how do you intend to mitigate the risk of climate change across the joint force?
Thank you, Senator. I think that climate change is a top national security issue. One of the jobs that I would have in front of me if I'm confirmed is to revise the National Defense Strategy. I think as we do so, we need to build on the 2018 strategy, which I think is an excellent document, and I think especially we need to get the China challenge right. But there are some things that weren't in the 2018 document that we need to include, and climate change is one of them. And so I would see a principal role of mine is to make sure that climate change is integrated into the National Defense Strategy, and then there will be policies and investments that flow from that. And as I said to Senator Blumenthal, that means that the strategy has to account for the effect that climate change will have on DoD operations, on the contingencies the department could be called upon to respond to, on DoD infrastructure, and also energy resilience. So I would make sure all those areas are covered.
Thank you very much for that kind of commitment. I want to turn briefly to the Indo-Pacific AOR. In fiscal year 21, NDA included $2.2 billion for the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, PDI, to bolster our alliances in the Indo-Pacific and counter increasingly malign Chinese activities in the region. The Indo-PACOM Commander, Admiral Davison, just submitted a report asking for an additional $4.7 billion in fiscal year 22 for the PDI to continue momentum in this area. I would ask that you continue to build on the PDI and engage with our allies in the region, especially the freely associated states, FAS, like Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands. I hope you will continue that kind of engagement and support.
Yes, Senator, I strongly commend you and others on the committee for the Pacific Deterrence Initiative. There's a lot of bipartisan support for supporting our allies and partners in the region, and you have my commitment to act in that regard if I'm confirmed.
Thank you. I look forward to working